What if I told you that right now, as you read these words, you're either speaking yourself into wealth or programming yourself into poverty, and you don't even realize it? What if every financial setback, every struggle to make ends meet, every moment you felt trapped by your circumstances wasn't actually about the economy, your education, or how hard you work, but about something far more subtle and powerful? A linguistic pattern running in the background of your mind like invisible software that's been determining your financial destiny since childhood. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover in the next few minutes will fundamentally shift how you understand the relationship between your words and your wealth. There's a reason this audio is titled, "This Will Only Work If You're Truly Ready," because what I'm sharing isn't for the casually curious. It's for those who've reached that breaking point, that moment of absolute clarity where you know something has to change, and you're finally willing to look beyond the surface explanations that have kept you stuck. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what most people never discover. Wealth doesn't respond to your actions, your plans, or even your intentions. It responds to a specific frequency that you broadcast through the most overlooked tool you possess, your language. The exact words you speak, the internal dialogue looping through your consciousness, the phrases you repeat without thinking. These aren't just expressions of how you feel about money. They are active instructions being transmitted into the field of reality around you, commands that shape what shows up in your bank account, what opportunities cross your path, and whether abundance flows toward you or away from you. Has this ever happened to you? You work relentlessly, you follow all the advice, you do everything you're supposed to do, yet prosperity remains just beyond reach. Meanwhile, you notice others who seem to attract money effortlessly, as if they possess some secret code you were never taught. Here's the truth that will either liberate you or make you uncomfortable. They do possess a code, and it's not hidden in some exclusive course or reserved for a privileged few. It's been available all along, embedded in the structure of language itself, in how certain people speak about money, success, and their own worth. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because it contradicts everything you've been taught about wealth creation. This isn't about working harder, saving more, or finding the perfect investment strategy. Those approaches keep you trapped on the surface level, rearranging external circumstances, while the real mechanism, the one actually determining your financial reality, continues operating invisibly beneath your awareness. The question isn't whether you want wealth. The question is, are you truly ready to see how your own words have been the invisible architect of everything you've experienced financially? Because once you see this, you can never unsee it. Think about your typical day for a moment. You wake up before dawn, drag yourself through another exhausting routine, sacrifice precious hours with the people you love, pour everything you have into your work, and yet, when the month ends, you're standing in exactly the same financial position you were 30 days ago. Or worse, you've somehow slipped backward despite doing everything right. You followed every piece of conventional wisdom society handed you: work harder, save more, cut unnecessary expenses, be responsible. But prosperity remains like a mirage on the horizon, always visible, always promising, yet somehow never getting any closer, no matter how fast you run toward it. Here's the hidden truth that no one prepares you for. The reason you're stuck has nothing to do with your intelligence, your work ethic, or even the opportunities available to you. The real culprit is something far more insidious, something operating below the threshold of your conscious awareness. You've been unknowingly speaking a language, yes, an actual language, that programs limitation into your reality. With every sentence, every phrase, every casual comment about your financial situation. This linguistic pattern has been running on autopilot for so long that it feels like truth, like an accurate description of how things are. But that's the illusion that keeps you trapped. Every single time the words, "I can't afford it," leave your mouth, you're not simply stating a fact about your current bank balance. You're issuing a command, broadcasting a signal into the invisible architecture of reality that surrounds you. That phrase carries a specific energetic signature, a frequency that the universe reads as a direct instruction. Maintain this person in a state of not being able to afford things. And the universe, which operates with mathematical precision, responds by organizing your circumstances, your opportunities, and your experiences to match that exact instruction. You think you're describing what is, but you're actually commanding what will be. If what we've explored together resonates with you, subscribe to this channel. This isn't just motivational content, it's a systematic unveiling of how prosperity actually works at the deepest level. The same thing happens when you casually mention that money is tight, or declare that things are expensive, or think to yourself that I'll never get ahead. These aren't harmless observations. They're creative acts, vibrational decrees that shape the matter of your experience. The mechanism behind this is so subtle that most people live their entire lives without ever noticing the correlation between their habitual language patterns and their perpetual financial struggles. They keep doing more of the same, working harder, hustling longer, sacrificing deeper, never realizing they're trying to solve a problem at the wrong level entirely. The transformation that's possible when you finally see this connection is staggering, because the moment you recognize that your words aren't just describing your reality, but actively constructing it, everything changes. You suddenly have access to a power you didn't know existed. You realize that the prison you've been living in wasn't built by the economy, by your employer, by your circumstances, or by bad luck. It was built word by word, sentence by sentence, thought by thought, by your own unconscious linguistic programming. And if language built the prison, language can also demolish it. Now, I want to go even deeper into this hidden mechanism, because understanding it intellectually isn't enough. You need to feel how these patterns are operating inside you right now, shaping tomorrow's reality in ways you've never noticed. The words running through your mind at this very moment, the internal dialogue you barely pay attention to, the automatic phrases that tumble out when you talk about money, all of it is setting into motion a cascade of consequences that will show up in your bank account, your opportunities, and your quality of life in the weeks and months ahead. The question is, are those consequences the ones you actually want? Or have you been unconsciously programming outcomes that work against your deepest desires? Write in the comments, "I see my patterns now," if you're beginning to recognize how your own language might have been creating the exact limitations you've been trying so hard to escape. What I'm about to share with you exists in a territory most people never even know is there. There's a body of knowledge, a collection of insights, that's been circulating quietly for over a century, passed between those who understood its implications. When the first people discovered these principles and began applying them, they watched their financial realities transform in ways that seemed almost impossible. Businesses that were struggling suddenly found perfect customers appearing from nowhere. Individuals trapped in dead-end situations stumbled into opportunities that felt tailor-made for them. Money began flowing through channels they hadn't even known existed. But here's what's fascinating. When faced with this power, these early practitioners made a deliberate choice. They could have broadcast it widely, shared it freely, made it accessible to everyone. Instead, they kept it concealed, circulating it only within trusted circles. And this wasn't out of greed or elitism. They understood something profound, that mastering the art of commanding wealth with words holds a type of power that transcends every traditional financial strategy you've ever encountered. It operates at a level so fundamental, so close to the source of how reality actually forms, that wielding it without preparation could create chaos rather than prosperity. These gatekeepers witnessed something troubling alongside the success stories. They saw people who learned the techniques without the proper foundation, who gained access to the formulas without understanding the responsibility that comes with them. These individuals would manifest sudden windfalls only to lose everything just as quickly. They'd create opportunities, then unconsciously sabotage them. They'd attract abundance, but lack the internal structure to sustain it. The cycle of gain and loss became more painful than consistent limitation had ever been. Now, before you think this is just another version of positive thinking or repeating affirmations in the mirror until you feel better, let me be absolutely clear. This is something entirely different. The popular interpretation of manifestation tells you to think happy thoughts, visualize what you want, maybe journal about your dreams, and hope the universe delivers. That approach fails for most people because it stays on the surface. It tries to paint over deep programming with a thin coat of optimism, and the old patterns inevitably bleed through. What we're talking about goes deeper than thought alone. This is about understanding the precise linguistic formulas, actual sentence structures, specific word combinations, particular ways of framing your internal and external dialogue that bypass your conscious resistance entirely. Your conscious mind is the part that argues, that analyzes, that says, "But this won't work for me because of X, Y, and Z." It's the gatekeeper that protects your existing identity and belief system, even when that system is keeping you broke. But beneath that surface-level consciousness sits something far more powerful, your subconscious mind. This is the part that's actually running the show, making 95% of your decisions, determining what you notice and what you overlook, what feels possible and what feels impossible. Your conscious mind might want wealth, might work toward it, might claim it as a goal. But if your subconscious is programmed with limitation, with unworthiness, with the belief that prosperity isn't for people like you, then that deeper programming wins every single time. It has to. That's how the system works. The breakthrough happens when you learn to communicate directly with that subconscious layer, to install new operating instructions at the level where your reality is actually being generated. This isn't about convincing yourself to believe something your conscious mind rejects. It's about using language in such a precise way that it slips past the defenses, past the skepticism, past the protective mechanisms, and rewrites the code at its source. You're not arguing with your limitations. You're dissolving them at the root by changing the fundamental instructions that created them in the first place. The journey from limitation to abundance isn't a straight line of steady progress. It's more like layers being peeled away, revealing programming you didn't know was there, exposing beliefs you didn't realize you held, uncovering the hidden architecture that's been silently determining what shows up in your life. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to reprogram," if this deeper understanding is landing for you, if you're sensing that the change you're seeking requires going beneath surface-level techniques to where your reality is actually being constructed. Listen carefully to how prosperous people talk about money, and you'll notice something striking that most people completely miss. It's not what they say that matters most, it's what they never say. You'll never hear someone who's genuinely wealthy casually declaring, "I can't afford that," or "money is so hard to come by," or "I never have enough." Their language operates in an entirely different dimension, following a verbal code that sounds subtle on the surface, but creates radically different outcomes beneath it. When faced with something expensive, the wealthy don't slam the door shut with declarations of impossibility. They leave it open with curiosity. Instead of "I can't afford it," they ask, How could I create the resources for this if it truly mattered to me? Do you see the shift there? One statement is a verdict, a final judgment that closes all pathways forward. The other is an invitation, a question that activates your creative intelligence and sets your mind searching for solutions you wouldn't have considered otherwise. Your brain is wired to respond to questions. Ask it a genuine question, and it goes to work automatically, scanning your environment, your resources, your connections, looking for answers. This isn't word games or semantic tricks designed to make you feel better temporarily. While nothing actually changes, this is understanding that language functions as the interface between your consciousness and material reality. The wealthy, whether they consciously understand this mechanism or not, instinctively speak in ways that keep possibility alive, that maintain an energetic opening for abundance to flow through. Their words reflect an internal assumption that resources exist, that solutions are available, that the next opportunity is always approaching. And because they speak from this assumption consistently, their reality organizes itself to prove them correct. Here's where most people get it completely backwards. They think the sequence goes, first get wealthy, then you can afford to speak confidently about money. But that's not how it works. The confident language comes first. The internal frequency comes first. The shift in how you relate to wealth happens first. And then, as a natural consequence of that shift, the external circumstances begin rearranging themselves to match your new vibration. You're not waiting for success so you can finally feel abundant. You're embodying abundance so that success has a frequency to lock onto and manifest through. The transformation you're seeking has absolutely nothing to do with finding a better job, discovering some perfect investment strategy, or figuring out how to work more hours. Those are external maneuvers, surface-level adjustments that give you the illusion of progress, while the fundamental structure generating your reality remains completely unchanged. It's like rearranging furniture in a house that's built on a cracked foundation. You can move things around endlessly, but the underlying problem never gets addressed. The real revolution, the one that changes everything permanently rather than temporarily, happens in a place most people never think to look. It happens in the invisible architecture of your consciousness, in that hidden realm where every single belief you hold about money was originally constructed. And here's what makes this so powerful. Those beliefs were installed long before you earned your first dollar, before you had any actual experience with wealth or lack. You came into this world as a blank slate, and then you were programmed. Word by word, sentence by sentence, conversation by conversation, you absorbed ideas about what money means, how difficult it is to earn, what kind of people have it, whether you're the type of person who deserves it. If something here shifted your perspective, hit that like button. It's you declaring energetically that you're choosing abundance over limitation. These early impressions created the template, the blueprint that your adult financial life would follow with eerie precision. You didn't consciously choose these beliefs. They were simply there, repeated so often by parents, teachers, media, culture, that they became invisible truths you never thought to question. And now, decades later, they're still running silently in the background, executing their programming with flawless consistency, manifesting exactly what they were designed to create. What's liberating about recognizing this is that if the architecture was constructed, it can also be deconstructed and rebuilt. You're not stuck with the programming you inherited. The beliefs generating your current financial reality aren't permanent fixtures. They're just patterns, habits, repeated neural pathways that feel solid because they've been reinforced for so long. Write in the comments, I'm rewriting my code, if you're starting to see that the change you need isn't external, but rather a fundamental shift in the invisible beliefs that have been quietly running your financial life from behind the scenes. Think back to your earliest memories about money. Can you remember actually forming your own independent conclusions about wealth? about what it means to have it or not have it, about how it works in the world? Probably not. Because the truth is, you didn't come into this world carrying beliefs that money is hard to earn, that rich people are greedy, that you have to struggle and sacrifice to survive. These weren't your original thoughts. They were installed in you, downloaded into your consciousness before you were old enough to question whether they were even true. You absorbed them from the environment around you. Maybe it was a parent sighing heavily while paying bills, unconsciously programming you with the association between money and stress. Maybe it was overhearing conversations about those wealthy people spoken with a tone of resentment or suspicion, teaching you that having abundance somehow makes you morally questionable. Maybe it was phrases repeated so casually they seemed like obvious facts. We can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work yourself to the bone to get anywhere in life. Each sentence, each comment, each overheard worry added another line of code to your internal operating system. And here's what makes this programming so insidious. By the time you were old enough to think critically, to question what you'd been taught, these beliefs had already become invisible. They'd transformed from external ideas into internal truths. They stopped being things you believed and became simply how reality is. You don't question them anymore, then you question gravity. They're just there, running constantly in the background, shaping every decision you make, every opportunity you notice or overlook, every action you take or avoid taking. The devastating part is that this operating system is still running right now, in this very moment, executing its programming with flawless precision. It's manifesting exactly what it was designed to create: limitation. Not because you're doing something wrong, not because you lack talent or intelligence or potential, but because the software controlling your financial reality was written by people who themselves were running the same limiting code. It's been passed down through generations like an inheritance nobody wanted, but everyone received anyway. But here's where everything shifts, where the real power becomes available to you. Money isn't random. It isn't chaotic. It operates according to a linguistic code, a hidden language that responds with mathematical precision to your spoken and unspoken declarations. This code functions exactly like a combination lock on a vault. You can stand in front of that vault all day, working hard, staying positive, hoping and wishing. But if you're not speaking the right combination of words with the right energetic frequency, the vault stays sealed. You're rattling the wrong keys, wondering why the door to abundance never opens for you. Most people spend their entire lives using the wrong combination. They speak the language of scarcity. I can't. There isn't enough. It's too expensive. And then wonder why prosperity keeps eluding them. They don't realize that every word they speak about money is being read by an intelligent system that responds by organizing circumstances to match whatever they're declaring. When you say, "I'm broke," the universe doesn't hear complaint or frustration. It hears instruction. It receives that as a command. Maintain this person in a state of being broke. And it responds accordingly, with perfect accuracy. The wealthy understand this code, whether consciously or unconsciously. Their language consistently reflects a reality where resources are abundant and accessible, where solutions exist for every challenge, where the next opportunity is already on its way. They never speak in ways that confirm limitation or position themselves as victims of economic circumstances. Their words keep the vault open, keep the channels clear, keep the frequency aligned with receiving rather than lacking. This isn't about manipulating reality or tricking the universe with clever phrasing. It's about recognizing that language is the primary tool through which consciousness shapes matter. The words you choose, the sentences you construct, the internal dialogue running through your mind every single day, these aren't just expressions of how you feel. They're commands being transmitted into the field of potential surrounding you, instructions that are being followed with absolute precision, whether you're aware of it or not. Write in the comments, "I'm speaking a new language," if you're beginning. To recognize that the words you've been using might have been locking you out of abundance, and you're ready to learn the combination that actually opens the vault. What's happening when you speak isn't just sound waves dissipating into empty air. There's an invisible mechanism at work, something that sounds almost too extraordinary to be real until you understand the science behind it. When you speak words of scarcity, when you declare limitation, when you broadcast phrases like, "I never have," "enough," or "things are always tight," you're generating a specific vibrational signal. And that signal doesn't just disappear. It transmits outward into what quantum physicists call the field, an invisible matrix of potential that surrounds you constantly, responding to the frequencies you emit. This field isn't passive or neutral. It's intelligent, responsive, always listening to what you're broadcasting. When it receives your signal of lack, it doesn't judge it as good or bad. It simply responds by organizing circumstances, opportunities, and outcomes that match your transmission with absolute precision. You're essentially placing an order with the universe, and the universe fulfills it exactly as requested. Say you're struggling, and you receive more situations that require struggle. Broadcast scarcity, and scarcity shows up in endless variations. The field doesn't argue with you. It doesn't try to give you what you secretly want but won't claim. It gives you exactly what you're consistently announcing through your words and the energy behind them. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't work for most people. You can think optimistic thoughts all day, but if the words coming out of your mouth contradict those thoughts, if your habitual language patterns keep declaring limitation, then the field responds to the stronger, more consistent signal. And usually, that stronger signal is the one you've been repeating unconsciously for years, the programming that runs automatically whenever you talk about money. Now contrast this with how prosperous people move through the world. If you listen closely to their language, you'll never hear them casually confirming limitation. They don't say, "I can't afford it," when confronted with something expensive. That phrase is a door slamming shut, a declaration that cuts off all creative possibility. Instead, they say, "How can I afford it?" Or, "That's not aligned with my priorities right now." Do you feel the difference? One statement closes the conversation, locks you into powerlessness, confirms that you're at the mercy of circumstances beyond your control. The other opens a doorway, activates your problem-solving intelligence, treats the situation as a puzzle to be solved rather than a verdict to be accepted. When you ask, "How can I afford this?" your brain immediately shifts into solution mode. It starts scanning your resources, your connections, your skills, looking for creative pathways you hadn't considered. Maybe it's not about affording it right now with cash on hand. Maybe it's about creating a new income stream. Maybe it's about partnering with someone. Maybe it's about developing a skill that makes it accessible. The point is, the question keeps possibility alive. It maintains your agency, your creative power, your position as someone who shapes circumstances rather than being shaped by them. And when wealthy people say, "That's not my priority right now," they're doing something equally powerful. They're not denying their ability to acquire something. They're simply making a conscious choice about where to direct their resources. That subtle distinction maintains their identity as someone who has options, who makes decisions from abundance rather than lack. The energy behind those words is completely different from "I can't afford it." One comes from power, the other from powerlessness. And the field reads that energetic distinction immediately, responding to each with radically different manifestations. This isn't about faking confidence you don't feel or pretending you have resources you don't possess. It's about recognizing that your language isn't neutral. Every phrase you speak about money is either programming expansion or programming contraction. There's no middle ground. You're either opening pathways for prosperity to flow toward you, or you're reinforcing walls that keep it at a distance. And this happens whether you're paying attention or operating on complete autopilot, which is how most people move through their financial lives. The transformation begins the moment you start treating your words as creative tools rather than passive descriptions. When you realize that you're not reporting on a fixed reality, but actively constructing reality through the declarations you make, moment by moment, everything changes. Suddenly, you have access to a form of power that transcends any external strategy or technique. Write in the comments, "My words create my world." If you're recognizing that the language you've been using isn't just reflecting your financial situation, it's been actively creating it, and now you're ready to wield that creative power consciously. There's something almost mystical that happens when you start viewing money not as an inanimate object or a neutral resource, but as something carrying its own form of intelligence. Stay with me here, because this shift in perspective changes everything about how you interact with wealth. Money behaves as if it has consciousness, as if it's aware of who's calling it and how they're calling it. It responds to those who speak its language fluently, who understand the vibrational codes it recognizes and moves toward. And here's what makes this so powerful. This intelligence doesn't care about your resume, your family background, the number of hours you work, or how many degrees hang on your wall. It responds exclusively to the vibrational signature embedded in your verbal declarations and the beliefs those declarations reveal. Think of money like a frequency on a radio dial. If you're broadcasting on the scarcity station, constantly transmitting signals of lack and limitation and struggle, money picks up that frequency and moves in the opposite direction. But if you're broadcasting on the abundance frequency, speaking from a place of expectation and worthiness and flow, money recognizes that signature and gravitates toward it naturally. It's not personal. It's not judging your character or deciding whether you deserve it. It's simply responding to the signal you're consistently putting out into the world. Now here's where things get completely counterintuitive, where everything you've been taught about achievement gets turned upside down. The people who fight hardest for money, who sacrifice everything, who push themselves to absolute exhaustion in pursuit of wealth, these are often the very people who watch prosperity slip further from their grasp. With each passing year, meanwhile, there are others who seem to float effortlessly into abundance, as if money finds them rather than the other way around. And when you see this pattern, your first instinct might be to call it luck, privilege, or some cosmic injustice. But it's none of those things. What's actually happening is this: struggle creates resistance. When you approach money from a place of desperation, when every fiber of your being is clenched with the energy of, "I need this," or "I'm finished," you're generating a magnetic field that repels the very thing you're chasing. It's like trying to catch a butterfly by running after it with a net. The more aggressively you pursue, the more certainly it evades you. The desperation itself becomes the barrier. The fighting creates friction. The forcing produces the opposite of what you intend. This doesn't mean you sit around passively hoping money falls from the sky. It means you learn the difference between inspired action and desperate action, between working from alignment and working from fear. When you're desperate, that energy infects everything you do. You make decisions from scarcity rather than wisdom. You grasp at opportunities that don't actually serve you. You repel potential partners or clients because they can feel the neediness radiating from you, even if they can't consciously articulate what they're sensing. Desperation has a frequency, and it's one that money actively moves away from. But when you shift into a different state, when you cultivate what some call relaxed certainty, simultaneously unattached to specific timelines while remaining absolutely certain about the eventual outcome, everything transforms. You stop strangling your desires with the grip of fear. You create internal space, a calm receptivity that says, I'm open to receiving this or something even better, and I trust the intelligence of life to deliver it in perfect timing. This isn't passive resignation. It's active, allowing. It's the difference between swimming against a powerful current, exhausting yourself while making minimal progress, and learning to work with the current, using far less effort while moving much faster. The paradox is that the moment you release the death grip, the moment you stop fighting and forcing and desperately grasping opportunities that would have required enormous effort to pursue, suddenly present themselves without you looking for them. Money that felt stuck begins circulating. People who can help you appear in your life as if summoned by an invisible signal you didn't consciously send. Nature abhors a vacuum. When you create energetic space within your consciousness by releasing the contracted energy of desperation, the natural flow of abundance rushes in to fill that space automatically. Write in the comments, I release the struggle, if you're recognizing that maybe the fight itself has been the problem, and you're ready to discover what happens when you shift from forcing to flowing, from desperation to trust. The origin of this understanding, this knowledge about how language commands wealth, comes from a fascinating story that most people have never heard. Over a century ago, there was a man whose name has been deliberately obscured from historical records, someone who had everything that society tells us defines success. He possessed substantial wealth, influence, respect, the kind of financial security that makes you believe you've figured out the game of prosperity. Then, in a single catastrophic event, a financial collapse wiped it all away. Not just his fortune, but his entire identity, his sense of who he was in the world. Now, most people in that position would do one of two things. They'd either spend the rest of their lives trying to rebuild what they lost, using the exact same methods that got them there the first time, or they'd drown in bitterness about their misfortune, blaming external circumstances, feeling victimized by forces beyond their control. This man did neither. Instead, he made a decision that seemed completely irrational to everyone who knew him. He disappeared. For 7 full years, he withdrew completely from society, not in defeat or despair, but in search of something deeper than money itself. He wanted to understand the invisible mechanics behind wealth, the hidden architecture that determines why some people naturally magnetize abundance while others, despite doing everything right, according to conventional wisdom, remain perpetually broke. During those years of isolation, studying, observing, experimenting with his own consciousness, he uncovered something that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone who later discovered his findings. What he documented wasn't another investment strategy or business framework. It wasn't about market timing or networking or any of the external maneuvers people typically associate with wealth creation. He discovered something far more fundamental, something that operates at the source level where all material manifestation originates. His revelation was this: wealth doesn't come from the external world and move inward. That entire model is backwards. Wealth originates from consciousness and expresses itself outward into material form. Every dollar in your bank account, every opportunity that crosses your path, every financial breakthrough you experience is a direct manifestation of the vibrational state you're broadcasting through your words, thoughts, and deepest beliefs about what you deserve and what's possible for you. This realization hit him with the force of absolute truth. He understood that his original fortune hadn't really been built by his business acumen or strategic decisions. Those were merely the channels, the pathways through which an internal state of abundance consciousness expressed itself into physical reality. When he lost everything, he hadn't actually lost his money. He'd lost his alignment with the frequency that naturally attracts money. The external wealth was just a symptom, a reflection of an internal state. And when that internal state collapsed, the external manifestation had no choice but to collapse with it. What made his discovery so revolutionary was the precision with which he documented how language operates as the primary interface between consciousness and material reality. He observed wealthy individuals carefully, studying not just what they did but how they spoke, how they thought, what unconscious patterns governed their relationship with money. He noticed that these people, even when they didn't consciously understand why, instinctively avoided certain verbal patterns and gravitationally moved toward others. They never spoke of money as something scarce or hard to obtain. They never positioned themselves as victims of economic circumstances. Their words consistently reflected a reality where resources were abundant and accessible, where solutions existed for every challenge, where the next opportunity was always approaching. And here's what makes this knowledge truly transformative. It's completely democratic. You don't need capital to begin. You don't need connections, credentials, or permission from any external authority. You don't need to be born into the right family or have access to secret networks. You simply need to become conscious of the linguistic commands you're issuing every single day and deliberately reprogram them to align with the frequency of wealth rather than the frequency of limitation. Write in the comments, consciousness creates wealth, if this understanding is clicking for you. If you're seeing that the change you're seeking isn't about manipulating external circumstances, but about shifting the internal state that's broadcasting your financial reality into existence. What makes this understanding so incredibly powerful is its accessibility. There are no gatekeepers standing between you and this transformation. You don't need a trust fund to get started. You don't need insider connections or prestigious credentials. You don't need permission from anyone in a position of authority. The only requirement is willingness. Willingness to become conscious of the linguistic patterns you've been running unconsciously, and willingness to deliberately reprogram them into alignment with prosperity rather than limitation. This is radically different from almost every other path to wealth you've ever encountered. Traditional routes require capital, education, networks, opportunities that aren't equally available to everyone. They're structured in ways that favor certain people while excluding others. But the mechanism we're discussing operates at a level that transcends all those external factors. Your consciousness doesn't care about your starting point. The field doesn't check your resume before responding to your frequency. The universe doesn't require you to prove yourself worthy before it begins organizing circumstances to match your internal state. The transformation is available right now, in this moment, regardless of what your bank account currently shows or what your past experiences have been. You could be starting from absolute zero, carrying debt, feeling completely overwhelmed by your circumstances, and still access this power fully. Because the change doesn't happen out there in your external situation. It happens in here, in the invisible realm of belief and language and consciousness, where all physical manifestation originates. And that realm is equally accessible to everyone who chooses to enter it deliberately. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn, one that explains why this knowledge hasn't been shouted from rooftops, why it hasn't become mainstream common sense. When the first group of people applied these principles and watched their financial realities transform in ways that seemed almost impossible, they faced a profound choice. They could share this knowledge openly with the world, making it freely available to anyone who wanted it. Or they could guard it carefully, passing it only to those within their trusted circles who they believed were prepared to wield it responsibly. They chose protection over proliferation. And this wasn't because they were selfish or wanted to hoard wealth for themselves. They understood something most people don't consider: power of this magnitude in Unprepared hands can be dangerous, not to others, but to the person wielding it. These early practitioners witnessed extraordinary transformations. Businesses that were struggling suddenly found perfect customers. Individuals trapped in dead-end careers stumbled into opportunities that seemed tailored for their unique talents. Financial structures shifted within months in ways that defied conventional logic. But they also witnessed something troubling. They saw people who learned these principles without the proper foundation, without understanding the responsibility that comes with commanding reality through words, creating chaos in their own lives. These individuals would manifest sudden wealth without the consciousness to sustain it, leading to cycles of gain and loss that were more painful than consistent limitation had ever been. They'd create opportunities, then unconsciously sabotage them because their identity hadn't evolved to match their new circumstances. They'd attract abundance, then destroy it through patterns of unworthiness they hadn't yet healed. The gatekeepers recognized that once you truly understand that your words are commands being executed by an intelligent universe, you can never unknow that truth. You become responsible for every outcome you're experiencing, and that level of accountability terrifies most people more than poverty itself. It's easier to blame external circumstances, to point at the economy or bad luck or other people, than to face the reality that you've been unconsciously creating your limitations through the language patterns you inherited and never questioned. So the knowledge moved through society like an underground river, surfacing occasionally in the lives of those who were ready, who'd reached a point of genuine openness or desperation that made them receptive to its radical message. The manuscript circulated quietly, transforming individual lives without becoming a mass movement, protecting both the teachings and the people who weren't yet prepared for what it would demand of them. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for this responsibility." If you're recognizing that this isn't just about getting more money, but about stepping into a completely different relationship with reality itself, one where you're the conscious creator rather than the unconscious victim. Understanding how this programming got installed requires looking at your earliest experiences with money, back when your mind was like wet cement, impressionable and ready to harden around whatever patterns were placed into it. From your very first days of consciousness, you were immersed in a linguistic environment that downloaded limitation directly into your neural pathways. You heard phrases repeated so often they became the bedrock of your financial reality. Money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that. You have to work hard for every penny. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. These weren't just casual observations about the world. They were instructions, commands that your subconscious mind accepted as absolute truth and began executing with flawless precision. Your subconscious doesn't question. It doesn't analyze or evaluate whether something is actually true. It simply absorbs what it hears most frequently, especially during those formative years when you had no critical thinking skills to filter incoming information. Every time an adult in your life spoke about money with stress, frustration or resignation in their voice, you absorbed not just the words, but the energy behind them. Every time you heard, "We can't afford it," your developing consciousness filed that away as fundamental reality. Resources are limited. Getting what you want is difficult. Money is scarce and hard to come by. This programming runs so deep that most people defend it when challenged. Suggest that money could flow easily and naturally, and watch how quickly people rush to explain why that's naive, unrealistic, reserved for the lucky few. They'll cite economic data, personal experience, historical examples, anything to prove that scarcity is the fundamental truth of financial existence. But what they're really doing is defending their prison, arguing for the validity of the bars that keep them contained. because acknowledging that those bars are made of nothing but words and beliefs is more terrifying than staying locked inside the familiar cell of limitation. The scarcity narrative serves a purpose in society. It keeps people manageable, predictable, willing to accept conditions they'd never choose if they truly understood their creative power. When you believe resources are fundamentally limited, you compete instead of collaborate. You hoard instead of circulate. You operate from fear instead of abundance. And most insidiously, you pass this same programming to your children, ensuring the cycle continues across generations, each one inheriting the linguistic poverty of the one before. Now, to break free from this programming, you need to fundamentally shift how you conceptualize money itself. Stop seeing it as a thing, as paper in your wallet or numbers on a screen, and start recognizing it as what it actually is: crystallized energy. Money is a current, a flow, constantly moving through the universe, seeking channels that can conduct it efficiently. This isn't poetic metaphor. At the quantum level, everything in existence, including what appears as solid matter, is actually vibrating energy at different frequencies. Your body is energy. Your thoughts are energy. And money, despite appearing as something separate and external, is energy too. Think about how electricity works. It doesn't flow toward every house on the street equally. It flows along the path of least resistance, moving effortlessly through conductors designed to carry it. Money operates the same way. Financial energy flows toward those who offer the least resistance, who aren't blocking. It's movement with fear, doubt, contradiction, and desperate grasping. When you clench up around money, when you approach it from scarcity and need, you create resistance. You're like a wire coated in rubber, unable to conduct the current no matter how much voltage surrounds you. But when you shift your relationship with money, when you stop seeing it as scarce and start experiencing it as flow, everything changes. You become conductive. You create pathways for wealth to move through your life. Naturally, the way water flows downhill without effort or struggle. This shift doesn't happen through willpower or forced positive thinking. It happens through systematic dismantling of the scarcity programming that's been running your financial life, followed by deliberate installation of a new operating system aligned with how prosperity actually moves through reality. Write in the comments, "Money flows through me," if you're beginning to release the idea of money as something you have to chase and capture, and opening to the possibility of becoming a natural channel for wealth to flow through effortlessly. Once you grasp that money is energy rather than a fixed physical thing, the next realization becomes inevitable. Everything in existence operates on this same principle. Your body, despite feeling solid, is actually trillions of atoms vibrating at specific frequencies. Your thoughts aren't just abstract mental events, they're electrical impulses generating measurable electromagnetic fields. Your emotions create chemical cascades that alter your entire physiology. And money, which seems so concrete and material, is simply another form of energy vibrating at a particular frequency, seeking resonance with matching frequencies. The difference between someone who struggles financially and someone who prospers isn't found in their external circumstances, their education level, or even their actions. It's found in the frequency at which they're vibrating in relationship to wealth. This sounds abstract until you understand what frequency actually means in practical terms. Your frequency is the composite signal you're broadcasting through your habitual thoughts, your consistent emotional states, your repeated language patterns, and your deepest beliefs about what you deserve and what's possible for you. All of these elements combine to create a vibrational signature as unique and identifiable as a fingerprint. And here's where this gets fascinating. The universe operates like a massive sorting system, constantly matching frequencies to their corresponding manifestations. When you're vibrating at the frequency of lack, thinking thoughts of scarcity, speaking words of limitation, feeling emotions of anxiety around money. You're broadcasting a signal that says, give me more experiences of not having enough. And the universe, which doesn't judge your requests as good or bad, simply responds by delivering exactly what you're asking for through your frequency. Think of it like a radio. Right now, at this very moment, there are countless frequencies broadcasting simultaneously all around you. Music, news, talk shows, every conceivable type of content exists in the electromagnetic spectrum surrounding you constantly. But your radio can only receive what it's tuned to. If you're tuned to poverty consciousness, if your internal dial is set to the frequency of struggle and limitation, you literally cannot receive the abundance transmissions that are available at every moment. The signals are there, the opportunities exist, the wealth is broadcasting constantly, but you're not calibrated to perceive it. This explains something that seems completely unfair on the surface. How you can be in a room full of opportunities, surrounded by resources, connected to people who could change your life, and yet see none of it. You walk right past what you're looking for because your receiver isn't tuned to the right frequency. Meanwhile, someone else walks into that same room vibrating at abundance frequency, and they immediately spot possibilities you couldn't see even though you were looking harder. It's not that they're luckier or more privileged. They're simply tuned to a different station, receiving different information from the same environment. The wealthy, whether they consciously understand this mechanism or not, maintain a consistent vibrational frequency that resonates with prosperity. This frequency isn't created by having money. That's backwards. The frequency is what attracts money in the first place. This is why lottery winners who don't shift their internal frequency often end up broke within a few years, while entrepreneurs who lose everything can rebuild fortunes seemingly out of thin air. The external money comes and goes, but the internal frequency determines whether it stays, grows, multiplies, or evaporates back into the void it came from. Your frequency isn't fixed. It's not something you're born with and stuck with forever. It's something you can consciously adjust, deliberately retune, systematically reprogram. But most people never attempt this because they don't even know the dial exists. They think their financial situation is determined by external factors entirely: the job market, the economy, their employer, their opportunities. So they keep trying to change circumstances while their frequency remains locked on the scarcity station, wondering why different circumstances produce the same disappointing results. The journey from limitation to abundance isn't about learning to do different things. It's about learning to be different, to vibrate differently, to broadcast a frequency that matches what you're trying to receive, rather than contradicting it with every thought and word. Write in the comments, "I'm changing my frequency," if you're recognizing that the shift you need isn't external but internal, not about doing more, but about being aligned with what you want to attract. Everything you've been taught about the path to prosperity follows a specific sequence that seems logical on the surface, but is actually completely backwards. The conventional wisdom goes like this: work hard, put in the hours, sacrifice and struggle, eventually make money, and then finally, once you have enough, you'll be able to relax and enjoy abundance. That formula is drilled into most people so deeply it feels like natural law, like the only possible way things could work. But here's the truth that flips everything upside down. That sequence is precisely why most people never arrive at the abundance they're chasing. The actual order of manifestation runs in the opposite direction. You must first embody the vibrational frequency of abundance. Cultivate it internally, regardless of your current circumstances, and then take inspired action from that elevated state. When you operate from this sequence, money flows naturally as a consequence of who you're being rather than what you're doing. Abundance isn't the destination you finally reach after years of struggle. It's the starting point from which all successful action originates. This sounds insane to people conditioned in the traditional model. They think you have to wait until you actually have money before you can feel abundant, before you can speak from prosperity, before you can vibrate at that frequency. But that's the trap that keeps them stuck forever. If you're waiting for external circumstances to shift before you shift internally, you're giving away all your creative power. You're making your consciousness dependent on conditions when the entire mechanism works the other way around. Conditions respond to consciousness, not the other way around. When you're vibrating at the frequency of lack, when your internal state is one of scarcity and desperation, everything you do gets contaminated by that energy. You might work 18-hour days, follow expert strategies perfectly, network relentlessly, and still watch success slip through your fingers. Not because you're not working hard enough, but because the frequency you're broadcasting is constantly announcing, "I don't have enough, I'm not enough, there's never enough." And the universe, functioning as a precise reflection mechanism, keeps mirroring that exact reality back to you with mathematical accuracy. But shift the frequency first, through deliberate language changes, through conscious thought management, through words that align with abundance rather than scarcity. And suddenly, the same actions produce radically different results. The same networking conversation leads to a life-changing connection. The same business idea that flopped before suddenly catches fire. The same skills you've always had become recognized and valued in ways they never were before. Nothing changed externally. The entire transformation happened at the frequency level, in the invisible realm where all physical manifestation originates. Now, understanding this requires grasping something fundamental about how thoughts actually work. The patterns running through your mind right now aren't passive observations about your financial situation. They're not neutral commentary on your circumstances. They're active construction workers, building tomorrow's reality with precision you probably never realized existed. Every single thought you think about money carries a specific electromagnetic signature, and that signature broadcasts into the field around you like a beacon, attracting circumstances, people, and opportunities that match its frequency exactly. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual fantasy. Your brain generates measurable electrical activity with every thought. That electrical activity creates magnetic fields that extend beyond your skull, interacting with the environment in ways modern science is only beginning to map. When you think, "I never have enough money," your brain doesn't interpret that as a complaint you're making or an observation you're noting. It receives it as an instruction, a directive to maintain that exact condition of not having enough. Your nervous system responds by adjusting your perception, your decision-making, your recognition of opportunities. All of it calibrates to ensure the thought you just had becomes the reality you continue experiencing. It's a closed feedback loop, a self-fulfilling system that runs with ruthless efficiency, whether you're paying attention or operating on complete autopilot. And for most people, it's been running on autopilot their entire lives, executing programs installed decades ago that have nothing to do with what they consciously want now. The tragedy is that people go through their whole lives completely unaware they're sitting at the controls of their financial destiny, randomly pressing buttons that keep creating the same painful outcomes over and over. They think thoughts are just mental chatter, harmless internal noise that doesn't affect anything real, so they allow their minds to spiral into worry, limitation, fear, never realizing each spiral is literally a command sequence programming tomorrow's experiences. Write in the comments, "My thoughts build my future," if you're starting to see how the mental patterns you've been running unconsciously might be the invisible architects of everything you've been experiencing financially. Here's something that will completely shift how you relate to your own thinking. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a thought you're having and a command you're issuing. There's no separation in the neurological processing. When you think, "I never have enough money," your subconscious doesn't hear that as a complaint or a frustration or a temporary observation about your current situation. It receives it as a direct instruction, a mandate to maintain that exact condition of insufficiency. Your nervous system takes that thought seriously, treating it as a blueprint for what reality should look like, and immediately begins coordinating all your internal systems to manifest that instruction with precision. This is why worrying about money doesn't just feel bad. It actively creates more situations to worry about. Every worry is essentially a command saying, "Give me more of this exact problem." Every fear about not having enough is a request to perpetuate scarcity. Every anxious thought about bills or debt or financial pressure is programming being executed in real time, shaping the neural pathways that determine what you notice, what you pursue, what you believe is possible, and what actions you take or avoid taking. Your subconscious mind is literal. It doesn't understand nuance or sarcasm, or that you're just venting. It takes everything at face value and gets to work making sure your internal declarations match your external reality. This is the mechanism behind self-fulfilling prophecies, why people who expect failure tend to fail and people who expect success tend to succeed. The expectation itself is the instruction that reality follows. Now, if thoughts alone carry this much creative power, imagine what happens when you add the amplification of spoken words. When you verbalize something, when you actually speak it out loud, you're engaging a completely different level of creative force. Spoken words aren't just thoughts with volume. They're thoughts that have recruited your entire sensory system, your breath, your vocal cords, your hearing, creating a much stronger signal that broadcasts into the quantum field with exponentially greater impact. There's something about the act of speaking that makes an idea more real, more concrete, more solidified. You've probably experienced this yourself. You can think something privately, and it remains somewhat abstract, somewhat negotiable. But the moment you say it out loud, it becomes more definite, more committed, more actual. This isn't just psychological, it's energetic. When you speak, you're generating sound waves that carry specific frequencies, and those frequencies interact with the matter around you in measurable ways. Your words are literally shaping the invisible field of potential that surrounds you, organizing it into patterns that eventually crystallize into your lived experience. Every time the words, "I can't afford it," leave your mouth, you're not simply describing your financial limitation. You're issuing a powerful declaration to the universe, a statement of identity that gets absorbed into your subconscious and broadcast outward as your defining frequency. The universe hears that declaration and responds with mathematical precision, organizing your reality to prove you absolutely correct. This is why people can work incredibly hard and still remain broke. They're contradicting their actions with their words, and words spoken with emotional conviction carry more weight than actions taken from desperation. The creative mechanism doesn't judge your declarations as good or bad, helpful or harmful. It just executes them with perfect fidelity. Tell it you're struggling, and it finds infinite ways to keep you struggling. Tell it opportunities never come to you, and it filters out every opportunity trying to present itself. Tell it you're not the kind of person who has financial ease, and it ensures that identity remains your lived truth. This is the trap almost everyone lives in without knowing it exists. They state their limitations as if they're describing fixed, unchangeable facts about their circumstances, not realizing they're actually reinforcing the energetic blueprint that created those circumstances in the first place. It's like planting weeds and then being genuinely confused about why your garden never produces flowers. The creative system is working perfectly. It's just following the instructions you keep giving it through your habitual language patterns. What makes this understanding so transformative is that once you see it clearly, once you recognize that you're not a victim describing your reality, but a creator commanding it into existence, everything changes. Every sentence that begins with "I am" or "I have" or "I can't" suddenly reveals itself as a creative decree that the field of infinite potential takes as marching orders. Write in the comments, "I choose my words carefully now," if this revelation is landing for you, if you're recognizing that the words you've been using casually have been commanding your financial reality with precision you never suspected. The moment you truly absorb this understanding, the moment it moves from intellectual concept to felt knowing in your body, your entire relationship with your circumstances transforms. You stop being a victim passively describing what's happening to you and recognize yourself as the creator actively commanding reality into existence. This isn't an empowering metaphor or a motivational idea to make you feel better. This is the actual mechanics of how manifestation works at the fundamental level where thought becomes matter. Every sentence that begins with "I am" is a declaration of identity, a statement about who you are at your core, and identity is destiny. When you say, "I am broke," or "I am struggling," or "I am always behind," you're not reporting news. You're issuing a creative decree that your subconscious mind and the field of reality both take as absolute instruction. Your entire system reorganizes itself to prove that identity correct. Your brain filters information to confirm it. Your body responds with the chemistry of someone who is broke or struggling. Your behavior aligns with it, and the external world mirrors it back to you with perfect accuracy. The same thing happens with sentences beginning with "I can't." These aren't simple statements of current inability. They're commands that shut down possibility, close pathways, and ensure the inability continues. "I can't afford it" doesn't just describe a temporary financial situation. It creates a permanent energetic barrier between you and what you desire, reinforcing neural pathways of limitation that become more entrenched with every repetition. The creative mechanism takes your declaration seriously and gets to work making sure you remain someone who can't afford things, even when opportunities to change that arise. Understanding this places tremendous power in your hands, but also tremendous responsibility. You can no longer honestly claim that your circumstances are being done to you by external forces beyond your control. Once you see that your habitual declarations have been constructing your reality word by word, you become accountable for the world you're creating. And for many people, that accountability feels heavier than the limitation itself. It's easier to stay a victim with someone or something to blame than to become a creator who must own every outcome. But liberation lives on the other side of that discomfort. Because if you've been unconsciously creating limitation through your language, that means you can consciously create abundance through deliberate linguistic reprogramming. The same mechanism that's been working against you can work for you once you understand how to operate it intentionally. Now, what makes this even more profound is understanding that words aren't just abstract symbols or mental constructs. They create literal physical imprints in reality. When you speak, you're generating sound waves, actual vibrations in the air that carry specific frequencies. And those frequencies don't just disappear harmlessly. They interact with the matter around you in ways that modern science is increasingly able to measure and document. There's an entire field of study called cymatics that demonstrates how different frequencies create different geometric patterns in sand or water. Your words are doing something similar to the invisible field of potential that surrounds you, organizing it into structures that eventually solidify into your lived experience. Every word you speak sends ripples through the quantum field, and those ripples have consequences. They influence not just your internal state, but the external environment, affecting how people respond to you, what opportunities present themselves, which possibilities become visible or remain invisible. The energetic signature of your language travels outward like a broadcast signal, and reality responds by tuning itself to match your frequency. Inside your brain, the impact is even more direct. Repetition creates physical pathways, actual neural structures that become the highways your thoughts travel. Say, "I can't afford it" enough times, and your brain literally builds dedicated infrastructure for that thought pattern, making it the automatic response whenever you encounter anything related to money and desire. These neural pathways become so well-worn, so deeply grooved, that you stop questioning them. They feel like truth, like reality itself, when really they're just habits, patterns your consciousness has been running long enough that they've become invisible. The electromagnetic field surrounding your body also responds to your habitual language. This field isn't some mystical concept. It's measurable electromagnetic activity generated by your heart and brain, extending several feet beyond your physical form. When you consistently use language of limitation, your field takes on that signature and broadcasts it outward, influencing everything from how others perceive you to which opportunities you notice and what possibilities seem available versus impossible. Write in the comments, "I am the creator," if you're feeling the weight and the freedom of recognizing that you're not at the mercy of circumstances, but actively shaping them through every word you speak. The power of repetition in shaping your reality goes far deeper than most people realize. When you repeat a phrase enough times, when you think the same thought pattern day after day, year after year, you're not just reinforcing a mental habit, you're literally constructing physical architecture in your brain. Neural pathways are real, tangible structures, networks of neurons that fire together and wire together, creating superhighways for certain thoughts to travel while leaving others as barely there dirt roads that your consciousness rarely visits. Say, "I can't afford it" enough times. Speak those words in hundreds of different contexts over months and years, and your brain responds by building a dedicated neural pathway specifically for that response. It becomes the automatic unconscious reaction whenever you encounter anything related to money and desire. You don't even think about it consciously anymore. Someone mentions a vacation, and before you can consider whether it's actually possible, your brain has already fired down that well-worn pathway and delivered the conclusion, "I can't afford it." The neural highway is so smooth, so efficient, that the thought arrives with the speed and certainty of reflex. These grooves become so deep that they stop feeling like choices and start feeling like truth, like observations about how reality simply is. You genuinely believe you're accurately describing your circumstances when really you're just running an old program that's been installed for so long you've forgotten it was ever installed at all. The phrase has become neurologically embedded, physically encoded in the structure of your brain, operating below the level of conscious awareness where you could actually question whether it's serving you. This is why reading books about prosperity, or attending motivational seminars, or learning investment strategies often produces such disappointing results for most people. They're trying to overlay new information on top of a foundation made entirely of limiting language patterns. And here's the unforgiving truth. The foundation always wins. Always. No matter how good your new knowledge is, no matter how sophisticated your strategies become, no matter how inspired you feel after a seminar, if the underlying linguistic programming hasn't changed, you'll default back to the same outcomes you've always created. It's like trying to build a mansion on quicksand. The architectural plans might be brilliant, the materials might be expensive, the workmanship might be impeccable, but none of that matters when the foundation can't support the structure. Eventually, inevitably, everything sinks back down to the level the foundation can sustain. Your limiting language patterns are that foundation. They're operating at a level so fundamental that they determine what's possible before your conscious mind even gets involved in the decision-making process. People invest thousands in courses, read dozens of books, implement countless strategies, and then wonder why they keep hitting the same ceiling, why they can't break through to the next level despite doing everything the experts recommend. What they don't realize is that their unconscious linguistic programming is sabotaging every effort they make. They're speaking limitation while trying to manifest abundance, declaring lack while pursuing prosperity, reinforcing unworthiness while attempting to build wealth. The contradiction creates internal resistance that ensures their external efforts ultimately fail. The transformation that actually lasts, that creates permanent change rather than temporary excitement followed by disappointing regression, requires going deeper than surface-level techniques. It requires excavating the linguistic foundation itself, pulling up those old neural pathways that have been running your financial life on autopilot and deliberately constructing new ones that align with abundance rather than scarcity. This isn't quick work. These patterns have been reinforcing themselves for decades. They're not going to dissolve just because you read an inspiring quote or listen to a motivational speech. But here's what makes this journey worth undertaking. When you finally do change the foundation, when you systematically reprogram the language patterns operating at the deepest level of your consciousness, everything built on top of that foundation changes automatically. You don't have to force new behaviors or strain to maintain positive thinking or constantly remind yourself of your goals. The new outcomes emerge, naturally, inevitably, as the logical expression of your transformed internal state. Write in the comments, "I'm changing the foundation," if you're recognizing that the work you need to do isn't about learning more strategies, but about transforming the underlying linguistic architecture that's been determining your results all along. The shift from limitation to abundance can happen in a single sentence, in the space between one breath and the next, when you choose to reformulate how you speak about what you want. Take that reflexive phrase that probably rolls off your tongue multiple times a week without conscious thought. "I can't afford it." That automatic response has been shutting down possibilities for years. Now imagine interrupting that pattern mid-sentence, catching yourself before the words fully form and replacing them with something that opens doors instead of slamming them shut. Instead of "I can't afford it," you ask yourself, "How can I create the resources to acquire this if I really want it?" Feel the difference in your body when you say that. Notice how the energy shifts from closed to open, from powerless to curious, from victim to creator. You haven't denied your current financial reality or pretended you have money you don't possess. You've simply transformed a statement of impossibility into a question of possibility. And questions, by their very nature, are creative. Your brain is biologically wired to respond to inquiry. When you ask a genuine question, your mind cannot resist going to work searching for answers. This single reformulation activates problem-solving capabilities that the closed statement completely bypasses. "I can't" triggers no creative response whatsoever. It's a dead end, a conversation stopper, a neural pathway that leads nowhere. But "how can I" recruits your subconscious intelligence, your intuition, your pattern recognition systems, all the vast processing power operating below conscious awareness, and puts them to work finding pathways you would never have considered. Solutions you dismissed start looking viable. Opportunities you overlooked suddenly become visible. Connections form that wouldn't have formed before, all because you asked a different question. This practice of reformulation extends to every limiting phrase you've been using automatically. That's too expensive becomes, that's not aligned with my priorities right now, but I'm curious what it would take to make it one. I'm always struggling with money transforms into, I'm learning to create a new relationship with abundance. These aren't semantic games designed to make you feel better temporarily. They're strategic reprogramming of the language interface through which you're commanding reality into form. Each reformulation carries a different vibrational signature, broadcasts a different frequency, and therefore attracts different results. But changing patterns that have been running unconsciously for decades requires more than casual effort or sporadic attention. You need something systematic, structured enough to create real change, but practical enough to integrate into your actual life. This is where a deliberate protocol becomes essential, a precise sequence designed to dismantle your financial programming layer by layer, while installing new patterns that actually serve your prosperity. The process begins with pure observation, spending an entire day simply becoming aware of every limiting phrase you speak or think about money without any attempt to change anything. You just watch yourself with genuine curiosity, noting the patterns without judgment, building consciousness around habits that have been running invisibly for so long they've become part of your identity. This awareness alone begins shifting things because you can't unsee what you've seen. Once you recognize how frequently you speak limitation, once you feel in your body how those words carry the energy of contraction, you've already started the transformation. Each day that follows builds on the previous one, introducing new reformulations and practicing them in specific contexts until they start feeling natural rather than forced. By the third day, something interesting happens. You begin noticing opportunities you would have completely missed before. Conversations take unexpected turns. Possibilities that would have seemed impossible start appearing almost ordinary. By the fifth day, people respond to you differently, as if they can sense a shift in your energetic field, even though you haven't told them anything about what you're doing internally. By day 7, the new patterns have started becoming automatic, no longer requiring constant conscious effort, but beginning to run in the background, replacing the old destructive programming with language that actually creates what you want. The beauty of this systematic approach is its precision. It's not vague advice about thinking positively or being grateful, but a detailed roadmap through the specific territories of your linguistic habits, showing you exactly what to observe, what to question, what to reformulate, and how to anchor the changes so they stick beyond temporary enthusiasm. Write in the comments. Day 1 begins now. If you're ready to commit to this systematic transformation, to actually do the work of reprogramming rather than just understanding it conceptually. The most uncomfortable truth you'll encounter in this entire journey is one that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Your bank account isn't showing you what the economy is doing, how unfair the system is, or how unlucky you've been. It's functioning as a perfect mirror, reflecting back with ruthless accuracy exactly how you feel about yourself at the deepest level, in the places you don't usually examine or acknowledge. Money is showing you the value you've assigned to your own existence, to your contributions, to your right to occupy space in this world and receive good things. This revelation hits hard because it removes every external excuse you've been using to explain your financial situation. You can no longer point to the job market, your employer, the economy, your circumstances, or bad timing as the reason money remains scarce. All those factors exist, certainly, but they're not determining your financial reality. What's determining it is the quiet, often unconscious verdict you've been carrying about whether someone like you deserves to prosper, whether you're valuable enough to command substantial resources, whether abundance is something people like you are allowed to experience. Most people, when they finally see this reflection clearly, realize they've been unconsciously declaring themselves unworthy of prosperity for decades. There's a voice running underneath everything else, so quiet you barely notice it, saying things like, "I don't really deserve this," or "People like me don't get to have that kind of wealth," or "Who am I to ask for more when others have less?" And that voice, that internal judgment about your worthiness, creates an invisible ceiling on how much you can receive and sustain. This is why all the external strategies fail if you haven't addressed the internal foundation. You can learn the best investment techniques, follow the smartest business models, network with all the right people. But if underneath all that activity, there's a belief system quietly insisting you're not worthy, then no amount of external action will create lasting abundance. The mirror keeps reflecting your internal state. Circumstances keep organizing themselves around that core belief. You hit a certain level and unconsciously sabotage yourself back down to what feels familiar, what matches your hidden sense of what someone like you is allowed to have. Think about how you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. The internal monologue running constantly in the background of your consciousness. Is it kind? Is it encouraging? Does it speak to you the way you'd speak to someone you genuinely believed deserved good things? Or is it critical, harsh, perpetually finding fault and inadequacy? That voice isn't just commentary, it's the primary signal you're broadcasting to the field of possibility. And that field responds by organizing your reality around whatever that voice declares as truth about you. When you contrast this with how wealthy individuals move through the world, the difference becomes striking. At their core, prosperous people possess something that transcends knowledge or strategy or even hard work. They have an unshakable sense of deserving, a quiet confidence that they're worthy of receiving abundance, that their existence has inherent value independent of their achievements or external validation. This isn't arrogance or entitlement. It's a deep, settled knowing that they belong in spaces of prosperity, that wealth is something they're allowed to experience, that receiving good things doesn't make them greedy or selfish. This internal worthiness functions as a magnetic force, quite literally. When you feel worthy at a cellular level, when there's no internal contradiction between wanting abundance and believing you deserve it, you broadcast a frequency that prosperity recognizes and responds to. Resources move toward you with an ease that seems almost magical to those who don't possess that internal alignment. Opportunities appear that others miss. Doors open that others find closed. Not because the universe plays favorites, but because your energetic field is clear, coherent, sending a consistent message that says, "I'm ready to receive and I'm worthy of what's coming." For most people, the journey to wealth requires healing this relationship with self-worth before anything else can shift permanently. You cannot trick the mirror. You cannot fake your way past it with surface-level affirmations while the deeper programming runs unchanged. The field reads your authentic signal, not the one you're trying to project. Write in the comments, "I am worthy of abundance," if you're recognizing that the work ahead isn't just about changing your words about money, but about transforming how you perceive your own value and your right to prosper. There's a technique that sounds completely backwards to everything you've been taught about achievement, but once you understand the physics behind it, it makes perfect sense. Instead of chasing money with the desperate energy of someone running after a bus they're terrified of missing, you learn to create what could be called an energetic void, a spaciousness within your consciousness that abundance rushes to fill naturally, effortlessly, the way air fills a vacuum without anyone forcing it. This isn't passive waiting or resignation. It's an active practice of releasing the death grip you've had on outcomes, the frantic grasping that's been pushing prosperity away from you for years. Think about how magnets work for a moment. You never see a magnet frantically chasing after metal, running around desperately trying to capture it. The magnet simply exists in its natural magnetic state, and metal is drawn to it without effort, without struggle, without any sense of need or desperation. That's the state you're learning to cultivate, a magnetic presence that doesn't pursue but attracts, that doesn't beg but receives, that doesn't desperately need but calmly expects. The shift from pursuer to magnet represents one of the most profound transformations you can undergo in your relationship with money. And it happens entirely through the words you choose, the thoughts you allow, and the energetic stance those create. Desperation carries a specific frequency that money can detect from incredible distances, and it runs in the opposite direction every single time. When you approach opportunities, negotiations, or financial decisions from a place of, "I need this," or "I'm doomed," you're broadcasting scarcity so loudly that people unconsciously pull back even if they can't articulate why. Deals fall through. Circumstances rearrange themselves to confirm your fear. Energy that felt promising suddenly goes cold. It's not that the universe is against you or that you're somehow cursed. What's happening is that desperation creates resistance, and resistance blocks flow. You've essentially erected an invisible force field that repels the very thing you're so desperately trying to attract. The more tightly you grip, the more certainly it slips through your fingers. The more frantically you pursue, the faster it moves away. This isn't punishment, it's just how energy works. Like trying to hold water in a clenched fist versus cupping your hands gently and letting it pool naturally. When you're desperate, that energy infects every interaction. People feel it even when you think you're hiding it well. They sense the neediness, the grasping, the barely concealed panic beneath your words, and something in them instinctively withdraws. They make excuses. They delay decisions. They choose someone else who feels more grounded, more stable, more like someone who would be fine either way. Your desperation becomes the disqualifying factor that has nothing to do with your skills, your offer, or your credentials. The transformation happens when you learn to create internal space, to cultivate what some call relaxed certainty, being simultaneously unattached to specific timelines or methods while remaining absolutely certain about the eventual outcome. You stop gripping so tightly that you're strangling the life out of your desires. You develop a calm receptivity that says, "I'm open to receiving this or something even better, and I trust that it's coming in perfect timing." This isn't about giving up or lowering your standards. It's about shifting from anxious manipulation to aligned allowing, from forcing to flowing, from pushing against reality to moving with it. What happens when you finally create this void, this spaciousness, is remarkable. Opportunities that would have required enormous effort to pursue suddenly present themselves without you looking for them. Money that felt stuck begins circulating. People who can help you appear in your life as if summoned by an invisible signal you didn't consciously send. The principle at work is simple. Nature abhors a vacuum. Any empty space automatically draws in whatever is needed. To fill it, by creating energetic space within your consciousness, by releasing the contracted, desperate energy of pursuit, you allow the natural flow of abundance to find its way to you without obstruction. Write in the comments, "I attract, not chase," if you're ready to release the exhausting pattern of desperate pursuit and discover what happens when you shift into magnetic receptivity instead. Here's something that cuts against everything you've been conditioned to believe about how success works. The harder you struggle for money, the more it fights against you, and the more certainly it evades your grasp. There's a fundamental distinction that changes everything, and most people never learn to recognize it. There's working from flow, and there's working from struggle. From the outside, they might look identical, same hours, same activities, same apparent effort. But internally, the experience is completely different, and that internal difference creates radically different outcomes. When you're working from flow, even challenging tasks feel energizing. There's a sense of rightness, of moving with a current that's carrying you forward rather than dragging against one that's holding you back. Time moves differently. Problems become puzzles worth solving rather than obstacles proving your inadequacy. You still work hard, you still face difficulties, but it doesn't feel like suffering. It feels like expression, like the natural unfolding of who you are, rather than the forced performance of who you think you should be. Working from struggle feels completely different in your body. There's constant resistance, a grinding sensation that exhausts you, even when you're making progress. You have to force yourself through tasks that drain your energy. Everything requires willpower, discipline, pushing through discomfort. And here's what's devastating. Struggle broadcasts a frequency that actually repels prosperity. When you're struggling, your entire energetic system is announcing, "This is hard, I don't have what I need, I'm terrified I'll fail." That desperation seeps into everything you do, every decision you make, every interaction you have. And money, which moves toward ease and confidence, moves away from that frequency of lack. The tragedy of modern work culture is that it glorifies struggle as if suffering were proof of virtue, as if exhaustion were evidence of dedication. You've been taught that if work doesn't drain you, if it doesn't require gritting your teeth and pushing through constant resistance, then you're somehow cheating or not really earning your success. This belief system traps millions of people in careers that slowly destroy them, all while they wear their misery like a badge of honor, secretly resentful, but publicly proud of how hard they're working. But the most prosperous people aren't working harder than you. They're working from alignment. And alignment exists at a very specific intersection, a sweet spot that most people never find because they're too busy doing what they think they should do, what their parents wanted, what pays the bills, what seems practical and safe. This zone is where three elements converge with perfect precision. Your natural talents, the things you're genuinely good at without excessive strain, your authentic passions, what you'd be drawn to even without external reward, and market needs, what the world actually wants and will exchange value for. When you find the place where these three circles overlap, where you're deploying your natural gifts in service of something you genuinely care about that people actually need, prosperity stops being something you chase and becomes something that flows to you as the natural consequence of being fully yourself in service to others. Most people operate in only one or two of these circles. They're talented at something but hate doing it. They're passionate about something but terrible at it. They found market demand but have zero natural ability or interest in meeting it. Any configuration missing one of the three elements creates that grinding struggle, that exhausting sensation of rowing against a powerful current. But when all three align, when you're using your innate abilities to serve something you care about that others value, the entire equation transforms. You're not trying to convince anyone to value what you offer. You're simply showing up as yourself and discovering that who you are is exactly what certain people have been searching for. The work still requires effort, still demands growth and skill development, but it doesn't feel like the soul-crushing struggle that leaves you wondering if you can sustain this for another year. The words you use about your work reveal immediately whether you're in alignment or not. Listen to how people talk about what they do. Those in alignment speak with ease, with phrases like "I get to" instead of "I have to." There's enjoyment woven into their language even when discussing challenges. They're not performing false enthusiasm. They've simply found work that fits their essence well enough that even difficult parts feel meaningful rather than draining. Write in the comments, "I'm finding my alignment." If you're recognizing that the exhaustion you've been experiencing might not be a necessary part of success, but a signal that you're working against your natural design rather than with it. There's a practice that goes far beyond typical. Visualization exercises far beyond closing your eyes and hoping for the best. This is a precision instrument designed to hack your nervous system at the cellular level, to literally alter the chemical composition of your brain and the electrical patterns firing through your neurons. The technique uses specific breathing rhythms that trigger cascades of biochemical changes, shifting you from ordinary waking consciousness, where your rational mind dominates and resists, into altered states where your subconscious becomes extraordinarily receptive to new programming. The breathing pattern itself isn't arbitrary or random. It engages your vagus nerve, that massive neural highway connecting your brain to your body's major organs. When you breathe in a particular rhythm, slowly, deliberately, with specific counts for inhalation, retention, and exhalation, you're sending a signal to your entire nervous system that you're safe, that there's no threat, that you can release the constant vigilance, keeping most people locked in survival mode. Your body responds by flooding your system with neurotransmitters that promote deep relaxation and openness, creating the perfect internal environment for reprogramming beliefs that have been running your financial reality on autopilot for decades. In this altered state, something remarkable happens. Your critical mind, the part that would normally reject statements contradicting your current circumstances, temporarily steps aside. The gatekeeper goes on break, and in that window of reduced resistance, you can install new neural pathways, new default settings, new automatic responses to money that serve your expansion rather than your limitation. You're not fighting against decades of programming with willpower. You're slipping past the defenses and changing the code at the source level where it actually determines your behavior. What makes this practice devastatingly effective is that your brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and one you're actually living through. When you enter this receptive state and practice embodying the consciousness of someone who naturally attracts wealth, who speaks about money with ease, who receives opportunities effortlessly, your brain treats that imagined experience as real. It starts building the neural connections, the synaptic pathways, the information highways that would exist in someone who actually lives that reality. You're literally constructing the brain, architecture of a wealthy person inside your own skull, neuron by neuron, connection by connection. But here's where everything shifts into an entirely different dimension of understanding. As you go deeper into this practice, as you begin experiencing real transformation in your financial reality, something unexpected happens. You start realizing that this entire journey, this whole struggle with money that brought you here in the first place, was never really about money at all. The universe doesn't care about your bank account. It cares about your evolution, your awakening, your remembering of who you actually are beneath all the conditioning and limitation you've been carrying. Money was simply the lure, the presenting problem that got you moving, the surface issue that forced you to finally examine the deeper questions of worth, identity, deserving, and your relationship with the creative force of existence itself. Every financial struggle you experienced, every limitation that frustrated you, every moment of lack that drove you to seek answers, all of it was perfectly designed to bring you to this moment of recognition. You were never separate from abundance. That's the illusion you've been living under. You are abundance, temporarily confused into believing you were something small and limited and unworthy. The money you've been chasing is simply the mirror showing you this reunion with your own essential nature. This awakening transforms everything because you realize you're not trying to get something you don't have. You're removing the barriers that have been blocking you from experiencing what you've always been. The words you speak, the practices you engage, the consciousness work you do, none of it is creating abundance from nothing. It's clearing away the debris, the false beliefs, the limiting programming that's been obscuring the prosperity that's been yours all along, waiting patiently for you to remember and claim it. Write in the comments, I remember who I am. If this understanding is landing in your consciousness, if you're sensing that the transformation you seek isn't about becoming someone new, but about returning to the abundant being you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning that temporarily convinced you otherwise. If you've journeyed with me all the way to this moment, if you've absorbed these insights about how your words are commanding your financial reality into existence, then you're clearly someone who's ready for something deeper than surface-level advice. You're not just casually curious, you're genuinely committed to transformation. And that commitment is what separates those who actually change their reality from those who simply consume content and move on unchanged. I create this content because I believe this knowledge shouldn't remain hidden, that the linguistic codes of prosperity deserve to be accessible to anyone willing to receive them. If what we've explored together resonates with you, if you want to continue uncovering these intersections between consciousness, language, and material abundance, then subscribe to this channel. This isn't just another collection of motivational videos, it's a systematic unveiling of how reality actually works beneath the surface, narratives we've all been fed. And for those of you who made it all the way here, I'd love to know you're present. Write in the comments, "This message was meant for me," so I can see who's truly engaged with this level of understanding. Your presence matters. This isn't just you passively watching. We're building something together, a community of people who refuse to accept limitation as inevitable. If this exploration created something inside you, that sense of recognition when truth speaks directly to truth, go ahead and give this video a like. It's not just about algorithms, though. That does help more people find their way here. It's about you declaring energetically that you're in alignment with these principles, that you're choosing to stand on the side of abundance consciousness rather than remaining in the old paradigm of struggle and scarcity. And listen, there's a video right here that takes what we've discussed even deeper into the practical application of these principles. Specific techniques you can use immediately to start shifting your frequency. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey we've started together is just beginning to reveal its true depth.